Welcome back to the Win with Dice podcast, a podcast featuring members of the Win with Dice team. I'm Calvin, and I'm joined here by Ramon.
Hey guys, this is your first time listening to the Win with Dice podcast. This is a podcast all about tabletop RPGs. Calvin and I like to take a casual approach to the hobby, so we like to talk about the games that we love and the games that we love. But yeah, the games that the games that we run and the games that we play and the cool, wonderful, awesome people that we get to experience the hobby with. If this is your first time hearing about tabletop RPGs, go find yourself a table. And if you are a player at someone's table, maybe it's your turn to be the GM.
Indeed. As we say around here, we like to take a casual approach to the hobby and tabletop RPG gaming in general. Again, to try and, demystify the other side of the GM screen for people who might not have tried it, as Ramon mentioned. This week, we want to get into the Pathfinder 2E Remaster. Some interesting changes. A lot of it may feel the same in some ways, but there's a lot of stuff that is different, so we're going to talk about some of those things and get into all the cool new actions that exist, including a couple that I think people are going to be really interested in. But before we get into all that fun stuff, we have to get to the most important part of the show, the Win with Dice Weekly GM Tip of the Week.
Yes, the Win with Dice Weekly GM Tip of the Week, brought to you by Calvin. Thanks, Calvin.
All right, so this is something that sort of came up recently in the Lancer stream, the Lancer streamed game that I ran over on the Untold Stories Project channel. So, as is a typical habit for one-shots on that channel, it ended up being something that is not going to be finished in one session. And as we were playing through it, I sort of realized, I did come to realize, this is not going to be finished in one session. I think I clued into that like an hour or so in. But more importantly, something that was very important that I was sort of doing in that session is just not talking, really. The power of shutting up and just letting the players have fun playing out their characters. In addition, because it was a one-shot, I made a bunch of pre-gen characters, so I really got to experience, what other people's perspectives on those characters were. Because I had certain tropes and ideas going into making those characters, but then seeing how people played them out, the sort of relationships and combinations that came up between them, it really made that story much more interesting than it would have been had I just, rushed everybody along and said, here's this thing, this is the situation, time to get going, move it, so we can get to, the things that I had planned. And if I had done that, maybe it would have been, one session. I certainly, from experience, I have the sense that I can fit, at least one combat in a session of a streamed Lancer game. Until people get more experience, and then maybe I can fit more of that inside there. So that was the original plan, but they spent the first half of the stream coming up with a plan for the situation that I did not expect. And so as a response, I just had to figure out, how do I make this situation work given the rule set available? And, Lancer's skills, they're very narrative-based, so that wasn't too difficult. But it obviously wasn't what I had planned originally. And that just happened because I sat back and I let people do what they wanted to do. And I feel like it created a much better story than had it only been mine.
Yeah, definitely. Always. It depends on what the table is, but that's kind of my bread and butter. Is to not plan very far ahead and just kind of, jam off of whatever the players are cooking up. I don't know. I think of it as it's really you're in a band, really, right? Everyone's trying to contribute a little bit to the narrative. You are the games master only because you get to control everybody that isn't a player. But really, the whole table is playing a game together, including you. So sometimes you just roll with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it was something better than what I could have come up with on my own. I know we talked about this a few episodes ago, and I will probably go into a recap when it's finished. But yeah, I had the players having to deal with a holiday-themed mech adventure. So they were facing off against a giant bird creature called King Turkeydora, which the name they all loved, by the way.
Nice.
And yeah, my original thought was just get them into the combat and get things going, but then they were thinking of plans for luring the creature away from this colony that was on the planet that they were trying to help out and stuff, and they kind of went into a whole thing. They had entire discussions with each other. It's a lot of really cool stuff. I'll try to link to the VOD below or to the USP channel so people can check it out. But yeah, it turned out really fun, and I'm really glad that happened. And as much as I didn't want to run more than one session, as much as I thought I was, as much as I thought I could condense it down to one, I feel like this turned out better.
Nice, nice. There you go, folks. There's your tip of the week. Let your players play you, I guess. I don't know, Calvin.
That's one way to put it, and I think it's accurate. All right, so let's get into the meat of this episode. So, the Pathfinder 2E Remaster. I just wanted to give a quick recap, because we haven't talked about this since the beginning of the year, as to the how and why of this happening. So, of course, Pathfinder 2nd Edition, it comes from Pathfinder 1st Edition, and that comes from, well, our release is based on the 3rd edition of D&D, or 3.5 if you want to get technical. And like other things based on D&D, other, third-party creations, such as games, or even just classes and settings and other editions for D&D, that was based on the Open Gaming License, the OGL, which is basically like, it allowed people to make content for D&D by using that license, in very simplified terms. And earlier this year, which I actually thought was last year for a bit, but time is long. So earlier this year, Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast were considering changes to the Open Gaming License, changing it to a different edition of the license that would give them, it would give them license to use content made under that new license. People would have to pay essentially royalty fees if they make content with that license. There was provisions for, free like fan-based content that people could make, but that was also very limited in what it could be. Anything that was more like published material would fall under this new version of the license, which would have, if you get a revenue over a certain amount, you'd have to pay a certain royalty fee. WotC would have, license to use your content in any way they wish to do so. I'm very much summarizing it, but it was something that made people worried, especially with concern with regards to how that would affect like digital content. So a lot of people have been moving. A lot of publishers have been moving away from the OGL. Green Ronin, MCDM, Paizo, obviously, are moving away from having to rely on the OGL. Hence the updates to Pathfinder 2nd Edition that are a lot of name changes, a lot of setting changes, a lot of things that can possibly be tied back to D&D 3rd Edition have been changed. So there's, no risk to Paizo. I will say in fairness that by this point, and this was a few months ago, WotC has decided not to do that, and instead has moved the Open Game license to a Creative Commons license. I forget the specific one, but it's essentially just, they don't have that same control over the license. They moved it to Creative Commons, so there's no, as it stands, there's less or no risk, but people don't want to take that chance.
Exactly. And the best way to secure that is to, distance yourself from that brand, I guess. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. So Paizo has.
Indeed they have, with the Pathfinder Remaster, which is split into 2 books, with another couple coming on the horizon. Right now, what we have is Player Core and GM Core. Player Core, this being the first Player Core book, the other one coming out next year in the summer, I believe, and a Monster Core book also coming out next year, I think in March or May. And of course, the book comes with some changes and some things that are largely the same. It's consolidating a lot of information, so Player Core has a lot of stuff that was in the original Core rulebook, as well as the Advanced Player's Guide and some other books. Because, some new stuff that's added to classes is going to be scattered all over the place, like in the Advanced Player's Guide. So that was all brought in. The GM Core has stuff that was in the Game Mastery Guide, as well as the a treasure book that they released, I think it was last year, maybe? Again, time is weird. So yeah, it's bringing a lot of information together. It's sorting a lot of things out. The Player Core book is just player-required information. The GM Core book has GM-required information, including subsystems and all sorts of items, basically, like more significant magic items that would have been in the Core rulebook are now in the GM guide. So the Player Core book is just focused on here's what players need to know.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think a lot of things really feel the same. The GM core book especially feels a lot the same, but just with stuff added to it, as opposed to things significantly changed. At least significantly changed in the way that the player core book feels.
Yeah, I think that most of the stuff in the GM book that they released previously was very their own stuff, right? Like all of those alternate rules, as in like, investigations and duels and stuff like that, right? That was like their own, mostly just in the camp of, I think, Pathfinder specifically. So why they didn't really need to alter that, and as well as like these books are just kind of like trying to capture all of this stuff, because obviously this wasn't planned. Right, it was basically just a reaction and a shift of momentum, so they didn't want to like have all the other stuff just be like out of date, right? So I think putting all that hard work they put into like collecting it and putting it into these new books is the best way to go. And especially it is unfortunate, I think, because if you bought those treasure books, if the information is the same, it kind of sucks a little bit. But I think overall it's like good that they're doing that and not just releasing like a treasure book too, right? They're consolidating where they need to, so people could just buy like one book, right, and just get up to speed.
Yeah, and like for me, like I want to get all this stuff because I want to support Paizo. But yeah, if you're a new player coming in, if you're new a GM coming in, then you just have to get these couple of books, as opposed to, and I mean, to be also fair, you could just use Archives of Nethys or what is it, PF2 Easy, I think is another one that I've seen before. But you can just use like online resources to see all that information for free. But if you want to buy the books, you only have to buy 2 now. Yeah,
and actually, funny enough, Paizo is in very much support of those online resources. I think it's great that a company's just allowing, like, because you can't copyright information, right? Like, you can't copyright a game's rules, so these sites are very clearly like legal. So and they worked with I think Archives of Nethys specifically, I remember you mentioning, to help like not lose all of that old information, but also keep it and bring the updated information too. Like it was cool to see that, a online resource that wasn't in-house still being treated as like an asset to the game and the whole experience of playing this game. Yeah, because I think it is a significant asset. And also, I don't know if copyright law is that, because I mean, it's a thing that's like, you can't copyright rules, obviously, but you can copyright how you write them or how you express them. It's been a while. Copyright law is complicated. So like specifically, it's like for instance, they like the owlbear is considered like a D&D thing because it's because it's a thing that they've created. Like an owlbear never existed before, versus like a goblin, which is like in the Creative Commons because that's mythology, right? Right. Like an owlbear it only existed it first showed up in D&D, so therefore they created that thing. But like, so for somebody else to use it, it's like obviously clearly you're referencing this D&D thing, right? But specifically for the rules, you can't copyright the rules of a game because they're just instructions. Specifically, they're instructions about how to do a thing, right? So it's like you don't have to buy a chess set to know how to play chess, right? So the rules of a game is just the rules of a game about how to do, or like you don't need to know how a screwdriver works. You don't need to buy a screwdriver to learn how a screwdriver works. You just know how a screwdriver works, right? It's hard. It would be really hard to copyright that, and it wouldn't make any sense because, like, why would you gate information that way for human society as a whole? Like, no lawmaker is going to be like, yeah, that makes total sense. That's why there's so many monopolies. There's like 1 billion monopolies because it's like, I can make a monopoly right now if I wanted to, as long as all the names are different. Like, and someone wants to buy it, you can't stop people from making monopolies. Yeah, you just can't use the same name or same logo and everything. Exactly. Okay, I still think copyright law is complicated, but now I understand it a bit better. Yeah, at least as far as I understand. Clearly, I'm not an expert. I just have an interest in the hobby. So we are not lawyers. Take it with a grain of salt. Yeah, we are not lawyers, as much as we like to ace attorney it up sometimes.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's. I guess let's get into some of these changes because. But yeah, like we said. As a matter of safety, I can see why people are moving away from it, even if the OGL is in Creative Commons now. I can see why people would want to change some things. So let's get into some of those things that are changing. And as we said, they're moving away from D&D stuff, and that includes alignment, which is of course a significant part of D&D and Pathfinder itself, to be honest. You have your alignment of good versus evil, law versus chaos, and that 9-square grid that everybody has seen before with them on the 2 different axes. They're moving away from that for something that's a bit less rigid, I guess I would say, with Edicts and Anathema, which are essentially like philosophies or actions and beliefs that your character has, or the things that like they support, things they want to do, and things that they avoid, and things they don't want any part of. So you have your edicts, things that are encouraged by whatever individual code or philosophy that your character or your deity or maybe an organization or something that you're a part of may have, and then your anathema, which are the opposite, which are, things that you would avoid. Yep.
I like that way better than the alignment system. I think for the most part, we've really kind of thrown that out of the water unless we're dealing with like demons or devils or angels or those kind of like, this is a classically good thing. Right? Mm-hmm. This is a classically evil thing, right? And we never really use law versus chaos at all, really, because typically, like, all of the good things that you would see, like angels, are like good and law, and like all of the demons and devils, they're like chaotic or evil or whatever. Like, basically, they meant the same thing, and there wasn't really too much variation you can really pull from it. I mean, I know that Matt Koval specifically has like a whole philosophy between like the law and chaos route, which like he implements in all of his stories, which is kind of where I've drawn from. But most times when I'm GMing, I never think about it. And as well as like whenever you play a game that isn't, the dot fantasy universe, it never comes up ever, right? It's maybe in Lancer it's like pro corpo, pro not corpo, but like mostly it's like how many bodies do you want to drop? It's like the Renegade versus Paragon thing from Mass Effect. It's like are you just a good person or are you kind of a dick? Like,
yeah,
these are the choices you get.
I vaguely recall, it might have been around Gen Con or so. I vaguely recall someone saying, I don't remember who, and I'm probably going to kick myself for forgetting, and maybe someone will remind me. But I remember it being mentioned that law and chaos really didn't come up that often. Because they were obviously looking at, like, what is this going to affect if we remove this? And specifically the axis of law and chaos, I recall hearing that it didn't come up too often, outside of, as you mentioned, being tied to good and evil in a way that if you removed it, you'd still have that good and evil system, which they have changed as well.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like the nuances between what a devil or a demon is, it's kind of like it only matters like for the game's hard-coded rules, not like what they would mean to somebody trying to be like the idea of fighting one, right? Like, right. It's like, why is this thing here, or its motivations and stuff like that, right? Like, I mean, it does play into it, but I think it's less of like the alignment of what it is and more of like what this thing is, right? Because they're always like solidifications of like, or sorry, not solidifications, like, what's the word when you make something that's not a thing into being alive? That, whatever that word is, of like ideas, right? It's like, this is the anger demon, or this is the greed devil, right? So
personification. Is that what you're
personification? Yeah, the personification of human desires and natures. That's what it is.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So as we said, they got rid of good and evil, but for situations where that sort of context is still required, instead you have holy and unholy. Holy being, those being sort of tied to different planes or different deities, and holy being, like altruism, helping other people, and battling against forces like fiends or undead, and unholy being like inflicting harm and battling those celestial angelic powers.
Yeah.
And that'll apply to certain deities. When a character is pledged to a deity, they can be sanctified as holy or unholy, or neither, depending on the requirements of that deity. Some of them are like, you can be a certain thing. Some of them are like, you must be a certain thing. Some, I think, for Rasma, I want to say, I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure for Rasma is like, you have to be neutral, essentially.
Yeah, that would make sense because, again, right, like it, like the idea of what Phrasma is being the judge of souls, right? So it's like she needs to be very impartial, so she has to be very neutral, a neutral third party, So
Yeah, I want to say you have to be. I might be misremembering. It might be just like you can be, but I don't know. If I'm wrong, someone will call me out. But yeah, it's a thing that's like, you can be one or the other, or you have to be one or the other, depending on the requirements of a certain deity. Like an evil deity, you would be like sanctified. You have to choose unholy, versus one where you might have to choose holy, or versus one where you can choose either, or versus one where it's like, do whatever you like. Which again, and that will lead to different like possible abilities. Some spells will have like bonuses for sanctification based on which way you're sanctified. Some certain things like void and vitality damage can affect you differently based on being a holy or an unholy character. And there is like new kinds of damage. There's spirit damage, which affects like spirits. So it might not affect a physical being, but it can affect something possessing that being. There's void and vitality, which are sort of replacing positive and negative. But again, like with outside of that specific system, instead of just having like good and evil, you have things that like your deity would require of you. And those did already exist. It's just that those are kind of expanded on and applied to other systems, such as like your ancestry or your backgrounds, depending on how you want to play your character. Additionally, since we're talking about characters, Ancestries have received certain updates, such as, you have your Edicts and your Anathema, ones that are popular among those Ancestries, but they've also expanded on how versatile heritages work, and in particular how mixed heritages work, where you can pretty much just mix anything. You would have to have a discussion with your game master about how you want to go about that. But it's something that will give you access to the ancestry feat list of either of the two ancestries. And it provides examples of half-elves, which are renamed to Euvaren, and half-orcs, which are renamed to Dromar, which is, I assume, another OGL thing.
Yeah. It's probably like what a half orc is probably an OGL thing. I think that's really cool because the whole idea that the only elves and orcs can be half-blooded with humans is like kind of weird. It was always kind of weird. And then I didn't really get it because there was no real connection between those three species. So then why couldn't like halflings be a half orc? Would that be a quarter orc? I don't know. Like, it's just
a quark.
Quark.
Yeah, man, I like it. I kind of wish they had a few more examples. I don't need anything as specific as, I don't know if you've seen, there's a certain chart floating around out there about like which D&D races are compatible with each other. I don't need anything that specific, and it certainly seems like they're not doing that. But I would have preferred just some extra examples of something like that. Even though conceptually, I guess it's pretty simple, I would have liked to see more examples of it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, the idea came to me as just like, a halfling and a gnome. Like, why wouldn't those dudes like each other? They're all the same height, right? Like, I don't know the difference between halfling culture and that, but they can definitely make some babies. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, like for sure. I don't know. It would have been cool if they just gave us an example of a halfling and a gnome, and just like, how would this work if you want to make a character like this?
Yeah, but then they also changed tieflings and Asimars.
Yes.
Right.
They again had to change names of stuff because now all of those fall under Nephilim.
Yeah, which I still think is like an appropriate term for what those things are, right?
Yeah. But a mortal being mixed with a sort of other planar entity And again, so instead of your ASMR where you're mixed with a sort of good aligned entity, or your tieflings where you're mixed with sort of a more evil demonic entity, they kind of fall under the same thing, and you can have features of, you can really have features of either, because you have access to new ancestry feats, and some of them will be like, you know, you'll have some angelic traits, you'll have some demonic traits, and you can actually technically mix them as you want, as well as the base ancestry feats that you have from whatever your character's base ancestry is, which is, I don't know, I think that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, and like, you know, I think that they'll probably just add more, right? Like, as they add new books, maybe they'll just add in like, oh, here's this new race from this new book, and here's the additional benefits you get as being, you know, a part of this heritage, right?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. That's something I'm probably going to want to play with. I know they've added some changeling stuff, so I certainly want to look through that, because one of my current favorite characters is indeed a changeling. And they also, speaking of that, they did also specify what the call is, because that's a thing that changelings have to deal with, and I don't know if it was written out specifically what the call is supposed to be. And it's supposed to be this, you know, mental psychic influence that sort of drags or urges a character towards the hag coven that the character's mother was part of. I just like that they specify that, and I don't know. It was kind of vague before, I'll say. If it was written somewhere, I never found it.
Yeah, we just kind of rolled with whatever Tim thought it was a good idea.
But yeah, they did add a lot of stuff to witches and wizards that I really want to get into. But I think we should cover actions first, because I think either of those could be pretty lengthy. I'll just say, for simplicity's sake, witches have gotten a pretty big overhaul, including the types and abilities of the patrons that they have. Those have largely been expanded upon. And wizards have gotten a significant overhaul, because in addition to moving away from certain things to do with D&D, they've moved away from spell schools. So instead of every spell falling into the 8 categories of, you know, divination, enchantment, evocation, necromancy, all those kind of things, instead, the spells will still have certain tags that may be relevant, but when it comes to making a wizard, you, instead of having your arcane school, you'll have a literal school where your character learned magic with a certain focus on certain topics, and those will have a mix of things that would have been under different spell schools, but they have certain themes that relate them to each other. So like a war-based, like a battle magic thing will have some blasting spells that would have been under evocation, but also some protective spells that might have been under a different spell school.
Yeah, right. Like, you know, I don't know what my character Silrona, who is a wizard, he'd probably be a part of that battle because I haven't like dived in to see like how to recreate it. We might touch base on that, but yeah, I like the idea that, you know, wizards are so smart. They're like the only ones with their PhDs. Like, I do my undergraduate in Fireball.
Yeah, the class requires a PhD. Yeah, I do want to get into those things, but I did also want to make sure we covered other stuff, so I think we'll circle back to them, because I did want to talk about reposition, and things like disarm, and recall knowledge especially, I wanted to touch on. Some of it functions in the same way. The base thing of like just you gain knowledge functions in the same way, but they have more specification, they have more details on like what kind of questions can be asked, and they also have one of the things that you would get with a critical failure is that your GM gives you false information, but they made that optional, which is fun, which is, I guess, preferable. But they also have stuff of like that's just specifically how it's supposed to work, where someone is supposed to ask a specific question, and then from there, a secret check would be made. So, you know, if you're playing a game where people will make secret checks, but a secret check will be made, and the GM provides that information, so they can ask, like, can this creature be reasoned with? How long does this magic last? How large is this organization? And then they make the check, and then they get that information, as opposed to, I mean, what I've certainly done a lot of is just letting people know what skill they need, and then having them roll a check. But I mean, that's just a matter of not really liking to do secret checks very often. to be fair. But I do like that they provide examples of what questions can or should be asked to sort of specify down what the information that people are looking for could be. Because you can ask, like, what's this creature's weakness, or what's its lowest defense, and you can roll to get the answer to that instead of getting like a info dump of just kind of vague answers.
Yeah, I like that a lot because it's about the specificity, right? Too, about what you get, and if it's a simple question, like I think like a success would do it. I like it a lot. I actually like the example because I always think that all like the recall knowledge ability was really vague, and most times I just threw it out and just be like, I don't know, your character probably knows this because you're level 5 and you've beaten 1,000 of these things by now, or something like that. So it's like if you had a question about anything that's not new, like something you've seen before, you're smart enough to figure it out, I think, because it's less about like the character themselves not being a veteran fighter or something. It's the player forgetting.
Yeah, that tends to be it sometimes. And yeah, while you might not get like the exact like your character wouldn't know what a reflex number is, but I think as the GM, like you can describe like the character, the enemy looks kind of slow or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So then the player is just like, oh, okay, I have stuff that maybe needs a reflex save, so let's focus on that, or knock this character off balance or something. I just like that they make it a little clearer how that should work. One thing I see a lot of people talking about, so I brought it up, is the disarm action. So previously with disarm, it is an athletics check. You could attempt to knock an item out of a creature's grasp. And if you succeed at that, essentially what it would do is that the creature would have a penalty on attacks with that weapon until the end of their turn, where they would automatically regain grip on the weapon. However, now they do not automatically regain grip on the weapon. They have to take an action to regain grip on the weapon. So it's a little more powerful because you can mess with someone's action economy, basically. Essentially, either they sacrifice an action or they're at like a -2 for all their attacks with that weapon. So it's a little more useful for people who like to disarm. It hasn't come up like at all, I think, in most of our games. I can't really recall a specific time where someone did a disarm action. At least not maybe it just wasn't significant enough. But for people who do that, it's more powerful now.
Yeah, and I do like the drawback for a critical failure is that you become off guard. So you're like, off guard is also the new flat-footed that mechanic. So it until the start of your next turn, which is I think is pretty cool. It's like, oh, I'm trying to do some cool move, but then it's like, actually I'm going to be caught out. Which for the most part, like being off guard, you could be off guard pretty easy in this game because you just get flanked and then you're off guard. So it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, actually, this is pretty cool. I like it a lot. It means that even if you attempt to do it, you're getting a -2, which is like pretty significant. That could be the difference between you getting crit or not, right?
Yeah.
Which could mean like a whole bunch of different stuff, as well as like if you critically succeed, you get to just totally knock the item out of their hand, right?
Yeah, in this game, like, because being 10 above or below a DC counts as a critical success or failure, like, every number counts, really.
Yeah, every single bit of, addition and subtraction that you can apply onto something makes the world a world of difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it also makes your actions, I think, every time you try and do something, it feels like you're working towards something.
Yeah. Definitely, because like you can try to knock an item out of someone's hand, and if you're able to do so, you can maybe try to pick up that item. You can try to move the creature away from that item. You can try to, because then it becomes an unattended item, right? So maybe someone else can swoop in with a mage hand and take it.
Yeah, or I think the reactive strike, now the old attack of opportunity, happens when you also interact with an item, which means when they try and pick it up, hey, maybe you get a free attack.
Give them a bonk.
Yeah, give them the old bonkaroonie.
Yeah. Again, there's a few actions that I'm really excited about. One of them is reposition. This is a very interesting one. You can essentially force a target to move 5 or 10 feet, depending on how successful you are on an athletics check against their fortitude DC. And again, what really interests me here is just the ability to do like these minor movements that can maybe, get yourself out of flanking or get someone into flanking, because moving just 5 feet, I think, can be pretty useful when you're in the mix with melee. And while not every character has attack of opportunity or anything like that, and this is forced movement, so it wouldn't trigger attack of opportunity anyways, or reactive attack, I get used to saying that, you can move somebody into a difficult position for them. You can move them out of flanking or, into a more dangerous situation. I just really like that ability. That's one of those things that I feel like should have been there all along. Just like those small movements you can make to inconvenience someone else.
Yeah. It makes the, the tacticalness of it, where it's like maybe you just need to get, like, even if you get out of melee range of somebody, that's like one less action that they get to do because they have to move up to you and stuff like that. So it makes it feel more, the more that you're able to move your character on the board makes the whole thing feel a little bit more cinematic and tactical. Like, it just feels less than you're rolling dice and more like you're playing a game. Yeah. And then there is interaction. That is something that existed in the first edition. It's just interacting with stuff, but it has some expansions. There are some additional things you can do with it now. Specifically, what I was interested in is that you have ways to, as a single action, you can swap an item. So originally you could draw an item as a single action, like draw a weapon or whatever, but now you can swap as a single action. So you can swap your drawn weapon or your held weapon for something else you have in your inventory as a single action. Oh my god, Bren, beautiful boy. Like, instantly. Bren has more weapons than I think Sorona knows spells at this point.
Probably.
The dude is packing, so this is really good for that character.
Yeah, man, I really like this. It feels like a bit of a Baldur's Gate influence to me, because in Baldur's Gate you can kind of like switch your loadout on the fly, basically. And I really like it. I really like that no longer will we have to drop a weapon onto the ground just to take out another weapon in a single action. You can just swap as one action.
I know. It always like, things like that just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I'm literally shooting fire out of my hands as someone's turning into a dragon, but some dude can't put away a sword and draw another sword.
Yeah, like, just really quickly.
Really quickly. Yeah, that's I mean, yeah. I thought, like, let's make that more fantasy. I'm down. I love how Pathfinder is like, there's a lot of like magic fantasy, but there's also now a lot of martial fantasy, which I appreciate. Yeah. Pathfinder for making, fighters good again. They've always, ever since Pathfinder 2e, fighters have been top tier characters, and I believe it's because they focus on this cool action economy, and you get to do a bunch of cool stuff. And now, even better, you could just swap your favorite sword for your favorite hammer, and go to Bonk City on whatever you're fighting.
True. And one last action I wanted to look at is also under interaction. You can now pass an item to a willing creature, which I think is something that we've kind of had to house rule before, but now there's a specified rule for it, where if someone is within reach, you can take an action to hand them something, or you can throw it to them with a DC 15 ranged attack at 10-foot increment. So every extra 10 feet beyond 10 is a +2 to the DC. I don't remember if it's a +2 or a -2 to your action, but it's essentially 2 harder to do.
Oh my god, that is the coolest thing ever.
It really
the image I popped in my head was like, I remember back in the Fateseer campaign where Delorfic got that super awesome ice sword. I
Yeah.
mean, he killed the thing in one go, but it would be so sick. You like stab the dude with the ice sword and then just tosses it to somebody else. They grab it and stab the dude again and toss it to someone else. Like, like some real high fantasy swordplay nonsense. That sounds really sick. Yeah, it would be pretty cool because like sometimes like stuff has like immunities or resistances or things that only one person has, and like the magic sword that can only defeat the vampire or something. But not everybody gets to use it. Just don't drop it.
Like, I gotta admit, I love this idea of just like tossing stuff around so people can make better use of it. I think it's really cool.
Oh man, you could like disarm somebody, pick up the item, and then toss it to somebody else.
Yes.
Like a badass. And I'm pretty sure there's probably feats and stuff that allow you to do that in like less actions or like in a combination of a couple actions or something like that. But like I like that like by raw, like it's possible to do that in this game. So
yeah, if you make a couple of good rolls with your disarm and then your throw, it's possible to do that in one turn. Oh no. Oh, this is gonna be really good.
Nice.
So yeah, we did talk about how death and recovery has changed last week. I think in the errata for this, they are going to change it back to how people were playing it before. But it was essentially that, if you increase your dying value, you add your wounded value onto it, which we got into more detail last time we talked about this. We had Tim on and we talked about this a whole bunch. So if you want to see more details on that, you can go check out that episode. I believe that's being changed in the errata. Don't quote me on that because I'm not entirely sure. But I think that is being changed. Aid, I think we talked about before, with the DC reduced to 15 as opposed to being 20 before, so hopefully people are more encouraged to aid others. Mm-hmm. Another thing, I was going to say this is a small thing, but it's kind of a big thing. The GM book, the Game Mastery Guide, the original one had a whole list of NPCs at an NPC gallery where they would have different examples of different types of like jobs or categories of NPCs at different levels. Near as I can tell, that is completely gone in the Game Mastery Guide. I didn't see it in there. Instead in the Game Mastery Guide, what you have now is a treasure trove, which is essentially combining stuff from, that treasure book that they had, as well as the items and things that may have been found in the core rulebook before. So it's just squeezing all those things into there, as opposed to having them scattered around. And instead of giving players a list of, like, magic items that they can't get on their own, they would have to get through something the GM puts in front of them. Now it's just in the GM book.
Yeah, and I like that the way that they kind of broken it up, where it's like, momentary magic, which is like your one-use items, like your talismans or like, your potions and stuff like that. And then you have like the trappings of power, which are like, I believe are just magical items in general, like just like, your crazy belts, your crystal balls, all sorts of nonsense.
Yeah, like your real cool and powerful stuff.
Yeah, your real MacGuffin type of nonsense. Like the possibility tome. Holy.
Yeah. Pathfinder always has a lot of really cool items. So there's definitely going to be some stuff in there that you could... I think in the artifact section, there's probably going to be a bunch of stuff in there you could build a whole campaign around.
Yeah. And actually, I'm not sure if any of these... I know that they took out the alchemists from the core list of characters, as well as the sorcerer. They're not in the core list of characters. We got the witch, which I think is a super cool addition. Definitely the first instance, I think, of a witch. I feel like witches are like a very much like a Pathfinder thing. Like it's like I don't remember really seeing like a witch class in like a D&D product before, or at least something that was as noted in like more than Pathfinder has done it before.
I think you can make similar. You could call it similar to the warlock, but yeah, it does have its own. Especially now, it does have more of its own flavor.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did cover pretty much everything I wanted to, but I was wondering if you want to get into some of these either the spell schools or the witch patrons. We could talk about some of the witch patrons, because I think we'll talk about the spell schools if we do anything Soul Rona related. Or we could save it for another episode and give these things more time to breathe, maybe. Because I feel like we could do a whole lot of witch stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, maybe we should just go over let's do it for another episode, maybe even another video. We don't know. We'll see. And maybe it might be worth going through some of the classes and just seeing if there's anything really different between them, or if everything just kind of remained the same. But actually, what I do want to bring up, which I'm not sure if this was something that happened before, because I'm using an old Pathfinder. Like every time we play in real life, it's like we use physical papers. And the way that the Pathfinder paper or character sheet is laid out, they just flipped it, and I think that it made the whole experience of looking at the sheet way more better. Like, it's just that, like, the way that it reads from left to right makes way more sense. Like, they put the armor class on the left, and then your resistances and stuff like that, like your reflex and like wisdom and stuff like that in the middle, and then over is your HP, because when you get hit, you're like, oh, is it an attack? What's my armor? Oh, it got hit, go over to the right. It just makes so much more sense to me, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, actually that's entirely fair. Yeah, I know we talked about the character sheet a bit. It's certainly meant to be easier to read, and definitely I think that's one of those things that makes it easier to deal with. I have seen people talk about, the sheet, the original one, not being as intuitive as they would have liked. So hopefully this thing is able to, help those people out if they have some issue with the original design of the sheet. Maybe it's a bit easier to get through.
Yeah, I just like that, there's little check boxes for stuff. Your attributes and stuff are laid out a little bit better, I think. I think just the overall... the way that it's put together is just way better.
Sure. Okay, so I think maybe people can let us know below if they want to see, either we'll get into it in a podcast episode or a different video. We have been talking about doing a character creation video. If that's something people want to see, or if they just want to see like a podcast episode where we talk about this. If anyone has any specific input, they can put that in a comment below. But yeah, that's just some of the changes that are happening in the remaster book. Again, a lot of stuff is largely the same. If you know how to play the game already, then you will continue knowing how to play the game, other than some specific rule or name changes. There's certainly like value in this remaster with all all the new actions or the class updates and stuff. So if you want to check it out, I would recommend doing so, or checking out one of the online resources, or just buying the book and supporting Paizo if you're into the game. But so far, I'm pretty happy with all the stuff I'm seeing. I haven't seen anything that I dislike as of yet. Maybe that'll happen if I get into it more. But yeah, so far I like the remaster, and I kind of want to make a witch. I want to make a witch character and see what happens. Yeah, there you go, folks. So subscribe to the YouTube channel, which we never ask anyone to do, but really appreciate it when everyone does do that. And let us know your thoughts and feelings about the Pathfinder 2 remaster, and if you're using it at your table. Yeah. Ramon, anything else you want to say about the remaster before we head into the outro?
No, I think we're good to go.
All right. Well, yeah, again, people out there, thanks for stopping by and listening to this episode. If you are a Pathfinder player and you're interested in the remaster, if you've checked it out already, maybe let us know how you feel about it or any of the changes in it. There are some lore changes that we didn't super get into, and if those are, having more of an effect on you, maybe let us know. Just, if you're to the game, and if you've read it or played a remaster-based game, how are you feeling about it so far? And otherwise, as Ramon did mention, please like and subscribe, all the YouTube stuff you know how to do already. Check out our other videos as well, or the podcast episodes, where we've talked about other remaster details, as well as getting into the OGL controversy itself. I'll try to find the episode, link it below, if you want to see or hear more details on that. If you want to see more of our stuff, there are gaming streams on the channel. There's usually 3 a week on Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. The current stream schedule has Control on Thursdays, Baldur's Gate 3 on Fridays, and Mass Effect Andromeda on Sundays. So if you're interested in any of those, please check them out, as well as any of the other past streams. And perhaps sometime soon in the future, there will be another crossover stream with the Untold Stories Project channel. We'll replace some Baldur's Gate 3. Speaking of Untold Stories Project, as I mentioned earlier, I did run a Lancer stream there, and there's a bunch of cool stuff going on there. They're doing one-shots, and they started a new show, so this is a good time to go check them out. And since there is a link to the Untold Stories Project channel below, and if you're looking below, there are also links to Lancer RPG third-party writers and creators, all sorts of cool stuff they have going on there. And I think that's about it. Is there anything else that I have to say before we go?
No, I think we're good.
Yeah, I think I got everything. All right. Well, for all of our repositioning GMs and players out there, just remember to keep on winning with dice, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.